I'm hungry now.
Yeah, I know.
I had some last night. I'm gonna go to school. What my mom? When she cooks once, and today when she cooks remember soup, you can eat it. Everything's wrong. Oh yeah, you finish your lesson? You see you coming back. I said 2 o'clock in the morning.
All right, let's try to heal our attention.
Good morning, everybody. Immigrants, several amongst us who quietly changed their culture, their language, their appearance, and even their personality, sometimes many times a day. And they're all amongst us, and sometimes we don't even know. Today, the topic that I wanted to talk about is the Pakistani culture, the culture that my family comes from, and how they assimilate into the U.S. and they make the U.S. more diverse. And obviously, all cultures, when they come to the U.S., they make the U.S. more diverse. But specifically, I want to talk about the Pakistani culture today. So here's the melting pot. Here's America, and all the ingredients that go into the melting pot, they're all different. But as Juliana just told us, she showed us how, the final result of the soup, it includes different ingredients, but when it's put all together, then it comes out with a great result. So, starting off, the national language of Pakistan is Urdu. My native language is Urdu. My parents speak Urdu. So Urdu is spoken in Pakistan, but what I'm trying to get across now is when we come to the U.S., a lot of families, because they want to learn English and they want to assimilate into the culture, they teach their children the English language. And many times, what I've seen from my community, from the people that are from Pakistan, what they do is that the parents teach their children English, and the problem is the parents themselves don't know English, and so then what ends up happening is that the children they learn this semi-English, and they end up having an accent. My parents, what they did was that when we came to the U.S., my father told me that remember this, that once we've come here, we have to assimilate into the culture, but that doesn't mean that you leave everything, that you forget where you came from, that you forget the good stuff that you learn from your culture, and that includes language. Because by being bilingual, it actually makes the U.S. more diverse, and it actually helps the U.S. in many different ways, with the government and jobs and whatnot. And so, going a little further into Urdu, I remember I mentioned the topic of calligraphy. So I never actually learned how to write Urdu from a school or anything, because around here there's no school that teaches how to read or write. My parents taught me it. And this is what happens if, in cultures, once they come to the U.S., the way they make the U.S. more diverse is by the parents actually passing that information on to their children. And a lot of times, so like I was mentioning earlier, what happens is that once people come to the U.S., they want to forget everything that they left from their country. There's two kinds of people. There's the people who want to leave everything, and the people who don't want to leave anything, and they don't want to assimilate into the culture at all. So the best path is the middle path. My parents, they chose that they would send their children to the military. They would have their children become teachers and professionals and assimilate into the culture of the U.S. But at the same time, not forget the good values, the language, the skills that, you know, if I didn't have my parents teach me how to read Urdu, I wouldn't be able to understand anything that's written here. They taught me how to read Arabic and Urdu, and so that's one of the things that falls under culture. So English as a second language. For me, myself, when I came to the U.S., I was 3 years old, and I didn't know a single word of English. And my mom tells me that when I started school in Fredericksburg, I would come home crying every day because I didn't understand what was going on. But soon enough, I ended up having better English than a lot of my peers in school, you know. And so, but my parents, what they did was that at home, they spoke in Urdu, and only in Urdu. There was no English at home whatsoever, aside from watching TV. But other than that, my parents were like, if you don't speak Urdu at home, nobody's going to teach you Urdu outside of the house. So this is where you have to learn it, and this is how you're going to maintain it. So education. So some of us who are here that are Asian understand this stereotype, and it has quite some truth to it. But there's a reason behind it. Basically, Asians, because of the poor background that they come from, they didn't have the same opportunities coming into the U.S., the land of opportunity. You know, everyone here gets an education, and it's their right. It's a duty upon the government to enforce education upon every person in the U.S. And so, but in Pakistan and other Asian countries where education is not so easily accessible, the parents, they end up spending, you know, a lot of their time just trying to get by, and the children aren't always able to get educated. And so when the moment that we stepped into the new country, into this country opportunity, you know, that's where the stereotype begins. And the moment we're able to get an education, a lot of emphasis is put on their education. And basically, once we get here, I remember growing up, you know, not everybody really cared about education. But my parents, they always made me sit and study hours and hours and hours every day, and different things, you know, not just English, but, you know, stuff that they wanted to teach me from our own culture. And so a lot of my hours were just spent in learning. And so, but this is a very interesting quote that I found. It says, the stereotype of professions could have originated from the poor background history of many Asians compared to the Westerns. Being poor, many couldn't afford to go to school. Going to school was a privilege, which some of us may not understand today because we grew up here and we were tired of school, we're tired of education. But that's where the stereotype comes from. That's why you find a lot of Asians being professionals and doctors and engineers and whatnot. And my parents tell me about the time where they would actually sit under a tree and go to school. And so, and you know, I didn't realize that it was literally a generation away from me. But that's how close it is, and that's how, you know, lucky we are in the U.S. to have education, morals and etiquettes. So there's a couple of stories I want to tell real quick. So morals and etiquettes are taken really seriously in the Asian and the Pakistani culture, such as hospitality. So my parents always told me a story about two birds that had a guest come to their house. Basically, a person came and sat under the tree, and the birds actually broke their nest because the person under the tree was getting cold. So they broke their nest, and they gave that nest as firewood to the person. So he lit the fire, and once he lit the fire, he got hungry, and so the birds jumped off the tree and came to him and provided themselves as food. So this is how my parents told me how important hospitality is. Another thing, respect for parents and elders. In Urdu, whenever you refer to an elder, you never refer to them as their name. And such as, you know, in class we'll notice that you never call the teacher by their first name or even by their name. A lot of times you just refer to them as professor. In our culture, we don't even refer to our brothers and sisters as their names. Rather, we call them brother or sister, you know, or older brother, older sister. And so that falls under the family values and humility. So when I was a kid in 4th grade, I remember I did something wrong or something happened, and my teacher was yelling at me, and I couldn't look up at her. I couldn't look up. and she was like, look at me, and I was like, I can't. She was like, no, you have to look at me, because in this culture it's considered disrespectful not to look at the other person in the eye. But in our culture, if you look at someone who's above you in the eye, that's extremely disrespectful. So, basically, this is taught in our culture that basically you should take the good and leave the bad, as I mentioned earlier. And so this is just a saying that we were always told as kids, that you should be around people that are good, because they're like a musk. And if you're around good smell, then you get that good smell. If you're around bad smell, if you're around a blacksmith, then you're gonna get the dirt on you as well. So hospitality, I told the story of the two birds. And then there was another story of a friend of mine. His mom, my friend Corey. I used to call his mom Corey's mom because I didn't want to say her name. And one day she was like, "Why do you call me Corey's mom?" But she couldn't understand the fact that I couldn't say her name, And that's just the difference. But these are good values of the culture that I come from. That when we come to the U.S., we assimilate and we give a little bit and we take a little bit, and that's what makes us more diverse. And so diversity is the art of thinking independently together. Welcome, of course.
Question.
Yes.
So they go back to like that calligraphy thing.
All right.
Which one?
Yeah. So you said you understand what that says. So
Yeah, so actually they're all the same thing. It says Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim on each one of them, just in different styles. So the thing is with Islamic art, because Pakistan is an Islamic country, right? Or they claim that to be true. So basically, the Islamic way of art, they don't like depicting real things. They don't like drawing pictures of people because it can never be justice, right? And so what they do is they do abstract art, and you'll see designs and patterns and stuff that's symbolic. It won't actually be you won't actually see drawings of people. Such as if you go to a church, you'll see pictures, that are drawn of certain characters in history. But in Islamic places of anything, you'll never see a picture or something that's drawn. You'll always see calligraphy, because that's the take that they take on art. So I want to talk about that, but there's not that much time. But it says, "In the name of God, the most gracious, ever merciful." Yeah.
all of those together,
Yeah.
or just
Well,
each
no.
one in a
This
different
right
way?
here says it. This right here says it. This right here says it.
That's really
Yeah. These are just different examples that I found that come together.
All right. That's cool.
Yeah. Any other questions?
All right. Thank you, Charlie. Mar.
Yeah.
Oh, and
No.
by the way, this is the traditional clothing. I figured I'd put it on today. I don't ever put it on, so figured I might as well do it today.